I'd like to talk about landscape design today, but more specifically garden design. When I think of landscape design, I think of uh, the non-plant things we call the hardscaping, the things like the patios, the sidewalks, the lights, the gazebos. I'm going to focus more on just the plants, okay? Plant selection. And so, let's go here. First, some really just nice assortment of hanging baskets, believe it or not. You're going to wonder, why am I showing hanging baskets? We sold a lot of these at Home Depot just in the last few days, and we do every year. And you'll see the beautiful contrast with different types of foliage, like this right here, with the ferns and the hypoestus here, and the begonias, just really pretty together. And again, talking about containers, Proven Winners has a formula, you might say, a recipe for designing a container. So you would have the thriller plants, the things that are tall and give a little height to the container. You've got the fillers, the things that are in the middle here that sometimes spill out a little bit, but they fill in the middle here. And then, of course, the spiller things like sweet potato vine, and even supertunias and things that just spill out over the side of the container. So again, why are we talking about this? Because you want to do the same thing in your landscaping. Oh, and by the way, this is in here just because it's an artistic principle when you think about it. Usually a photographer, when they're taking a picture of a family, will have the triangular look to it. They've got tall things that are in the middle, and the things that are at the bottom. It's just an artistic principle, right? So we'll talk about some more principles as well. I'm going to touch briefly on all 6 of these. There might be others you'll see depending on who wrote the book or who's designing the course. There are other principles, or maybe some people will leave those out. First, let's talk about color. I do want to say green is a color. Don't be afraid of green. And green is actually a very relaxing buffer between other colors. So this is green, but it's all different shades of green. And we'll talk more about the texture and all that later. This is just a bunch of hostas. Again, different sizes and shapes. I don't know if you realize this, but there are literally thousands of named varieties of hostas. They're easy to hybridize, and there are so many options out there. This photo I took at Morton Arboretum several years ago. Again, all evergreens, all shades of green. And here it is in black and white. The textbook, actually, this is the name of the book I was trying to think of the other day when I did my presentation. The 4-Season Landscape by Susan Roth. Very, very good book. And she suggests that if you could take your picture of your landscaping and put it in black and white, and it still looks good, then that's a sign that it's a good landscape. You've got some colors and textures in there that make that look good, even in black and white, okay? So this on the left is a hosta called Empress Wu, okay? Empress Wu, W-U. This particular hosta has leaves that are like 18 inches across. The plant grows 5 feet tall. So look at those leaves. That is, when we say texture in landscaping, we're not referring to how something feels. We're talking about how it looks from a distance. Is it fine leaves or big leaves? And do you know what that plant is on the right? That is also a hosta. It's a hosta called curly fries. And curly fries only stands about 6 to 10 inches tall. It's more of a shorter and wider plant. It would make a good ground cover, actually. But those are 2 different hostas. And this actually, Empress Wu, there it is, a close-up picture of it. Empress Wu was hybridized by a woman I worked with at Home Depot several years ago, Virginia Skaggs. She and her husband, Brian, developed Empress Wu. Look how big that is. Like, you only need one. You only need one. It would make a good accent plant. Not like the curly fries, which would make more of a low-lying ground cover. There's curly fries again. Now this, I have to sing this part, okay? One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is kind of the same. Okay, so maybe you could tell me which. One of these is a false cypress. There's actually 3 plants here. I don't know if you can see that. There's 3 plants. One of them is a false cypress, and two of them are junipers. Now, I took this picture at a garden center, just took them off the shelf and put them next to each other like that. You would certainly not want to plant them all together like that because they all have the same fine texture. This in the top right is the false cypress, or Chemiciferous passifera. Chemiciferous passifera. I like saying that just because I can. That is the Latin name for the false cypress. These two, Liriope and Carex. Carex is it looks like a grass, but it's actually a sedge. And if you hold the base of the stems between your fingers, you'll notice it has a triangular stem. That's the sign that it is a sedge. The other one, Liriope. Liriopes don't even grow in our area. Now, unless this was one, I can't remember now, unless this was one that is hybridized specifically because the plant breeders are doing everything they can to get us plants that will grow in our area. But see, those two are very, very similar, but again, not the same thing. And you want a little bit more contrast. It's like getting dressed, okay? If you were to wear stripes on top and stripes on the bottom, and we would just kind of look at you kind of funny, right? Here again, sedges, fescues, and grass. The plant in the very back is, I think that's Carl Forster featherweed grass, which I have a picture of further in. But again, they have a similar form to them. They have that same kind of, yeah, like this, and the same texture of the foliage, which is a very fine texture. This photo shows different forms of trees. Now, it doesn't show forms of ground covers, which would be something that would lie at the base of these plants. But you can see the different forms of trees, just the trees. Some of these, like the pyramidal on the upper left here, an evergreen of some kind, but this columnar shaped thing down the bottom could also be an evergreen. So you've got two evergreens with different shapes. This one here reminds me, or actually, maybe we should just draw one in here. The pear-shaped tree, the Callery pear, which is a flowering pear tree, has a very nice oval-shaped crown. Unfortunately, that plant has been discovered to be very invasive. We will talk about that more in a little bit. But in our area, in Indiana as a whole, before long, it will probably be on the list of plants that cannot be sold anymore. Okay, there's the Carl Forster feather reed grass. It has that nice, tall, striking look about it that would make a nice accent or a nice border toward the back of something here. Or this one's got it along this sidewalk here. One of my favorites, Japanese forest grass, Heuchera cloa. I just love the way it looks. Now, it has a fine texture, but it has that billowing, just a nice, in the wind, nice undulating look about it. But the one nice thing is that bright chartreuse green foliage really pops in the shade. It really pops in the shade, I just love that plant. This photo, I just went online, honestly, and Googled nice landscaping pictures. And I wanted you to see this one just because it has the nice, that you can see the different forms and textures. We've got something tall back here, this nice big rounded plant, which looks like maybe a lilac of some kind. We've got perennials over here, and then the nice little fescues down in the bottom, just looking nice. There are things that are in bloom. One of the, I want to say the holy grail, or what gardeners aim for, is to have something in bloom at different times of the year. Now, something like this, I'm guessing these plants might all be done blooming around the same time, in which case, then maybe you won't have something that looks that good. So it's kind of nice to have a dynamic landscape, something that is blooming over here in the spring, something blooming over here in the fall, so that your eye catches, and there's something looking good at all times. At all times, shrubs and perennials, because they live for longer than 1 year. Because of that, they will only bloom for a few weeks at a time. And that's true. Like I said, I think that's a lilac, looks like from here, and that's only going to be blooming for a few weeks. So who knows what that will look like 3 weeks from now, that picture there. Okay, back to the evergreens. We've got all the different forms, and of that, the tall ones, the columnar ones, and the low growing ones here. I took this picture by St. Mary's Hospital in Hobart several years ago. I just love the contrast between the bright green junipers and the catmint, the purple foliage perennials. So there again, then the catmint blooms for a long time, though. It'll bloom for a long time. But it looks like when that's done blooming, we've got something down here, a low-growing ground cover type plant, foliage plant there, or perennial. Looks like it's going to be blooming before long. I would suggest that if you are going to, I meant to say, this is repetition. We're going into a new topic here. Notice the way those purple catmints repeat throughout the landscape. It gives a nicer cohesive look than if you were to put one of this, one of that, one of the other in there. And I suggest when you do that, that you don't plant them in rows like little soldiers, because then as they grow bigger, you could always, if you'll see this in a landscaping before, you'll notice that you can look through and almost see columns between them. It's best to put them at a little bit of an angle like that. It has a more natural look to it, and then they will grow closer together like that. Okay. Or make a random, somewhat random curving bed out of them like that. Again, a more natural look like this here or this here. Sometimes when people plant bulbs, for example, tulip bulbs, daffodil bulbs, they'll actually take the bulbs, toss them onto the ground, and then plant them right where they land, because that's what nature does, right? Or that's what the squirrels do, maybe. Around here, it's the squirrels. But it just gives a more natural look than to have something, especially something like tulips or daffodils all lined up in rows. What is line? Line is line. It's where your eye flows, what your sight leads to, I guess. Maybe I'd say it that way. Now you'll notice in this picture, there's a sidewalk. So that leads you to the front door. There's a row of the low growing grasses here that follows along that same line. That is one way to use line. You can also have your eyesight go toward a gazebo toward the back, and that's considered line as well. This is a hosta garden. Again, lots of different colors and textures of green, but see, it's got the path, flagstone path going through there. This is funny. This was taken at the gas station across the street from me. Now, while I would never recommend this type of landscape border, that's like a metal edging that you pound into the ground. After a while, it does just that. It starts to rise. The ground freezes and thaws through the years, through the winter, and that heaves up out of the ground. And of course, you can't mow over that without hurting your mower. And so you pretty much have to weed by hand, or a guy at a workshop recently told me he uses scissors to cut around there, or some kind of a clippers. But I like the line, the flowing, nice flowing line that goes in a curve like that, and the way those daylilies follow that curve with the catmint as an accent plant. Scale refers to the size of your landscaping. The bigger your house, the bigger the property, the bigger the planting needs to be. So for example, this was taken at Baker Square a few years ago. And I love the fact that there's not, well, first of all, I love the big planters. I love the foliage color, the contrast between lime green. Did I mention how much I love lime green and chartreuse foliage? Just love it. It goes so nicely with pink, orange, red. Yeah, it just really pops like that. But these are huge planters. And also in a commercial environment like this, those bigger planters will maintain moisture better. They won't dry out near as fast. But they also, because there's like, it looks like there's maybe only 2 or 3, I won't say 2 or 3 plants. There could be several plants in there. There might be 3 sweet potato vines instead of 1, or they bought one that was already fully grown, but there's only 3, maybe 4 types of plant in there. And so the sweet potato vine is big and huge and has a lot of impact. For the sake of impact, curb appeal, or whatever, one solid mass of color really pops more than just like just one of this and one of that and one of the other planted in there. Again, a beautiful home with nice big pots of supertunias and sweet potato vine with, again, see the tall accent of the grasses? This one has the spillers and the fillers like all mixed together in there. That's beautiful. My friend Brenda's house. This was at my house. There's that golden mop, false cypress, Chamaecyparis passifera, and a Gertrude Jekyl rose. That was there until they the town redid the street, and I had that removed. Again, nice contrast, but that golden mop has a moppy kind of look about it. So now I want to talk about some of my favorite plants or just some plant families. So let's think about Spirea, for example. For many years, the Spireas were green leaves, white flowers maybe, and but the plant breeders have come up with, first of all, they're giving us color and they're giving us the sizes that we want. So this one, for example, Gold Flame, this one's been around for quite a while. Gold Flame, because the emerging growth in the spring is bright orange at the tips, and then it will get pink flowers, and then again in the fall, nice, beautiful color there. I would advise you, or be careful, I would say, you could do what you want, of course, but to have too much color is, I laugh when I say this, too much color is like having too much dessert, and I have no problem with too much dessert. But you do want to be careful. Again, that green is a beautiful buffer between colored foliage. And if you were to, it's just nice to have something in between to rest your eyes. This is a Spirea called Double Play Gold, more of a purpley blue color on the flowers. Double Play Doozie. I don't know where they came up with these names, but that is a doozy of a name. Spireas on their own have just, like I would say, a fine textured foliage, small leaves. So the flowers really are important, but again, it's a shrub. It'll only bloom for a few weeks. With Spireas, one thing about Spireas is they are so easy to grow, pretty foolproof. And when they're done blooming, if you want to, you can kind of give them a haircut with hedge trimmers, and then they'll often bloom again. A trick that we did in the garden center so people could see what they look like and have more flowers. Plants sell better when they've got flowers on them. So anyway, that's Double Play Doozie. And again, these are different sizes. I don't remember the sizes on each one of these, but some small ones, some big ones. This is Fire Gold, Spirea, just white flowers, but the yellowish foliage on that one. And this one, every time I see this in the garden center, it catches my eye, because no matter what time of year I'm at the garden center, it looks nice. It's got those at the bottom, 4 different seasons of color, pink, orange, yellow. It's got pink flowers. It's got everything, and not a huge size. Viburnum, okay, so those are all Spireas, okay, all different Spireas. So now we're going to talk a little bit about viburnums. When I first started working in the garden industry, I can't say I'd ever heard of viburnums. It's not like a plant that everybody's talking about, and I don't know why. They're still probably not as common as, rose bushes or whatever, and but very easy to grow. Some of them are native plants and some aren't. The leaf looks pretty, that leaf in particular, nothing really crazy about that leaf, but it has flowers in the spring and beautiful fall foliage color. Burning bush is also considered invasive now. And I haven't determined whether it's been available for sale or not. It was not for a while, but I'm seeing in garden centers again, so I don't know what's up with that. But it is a plant that's considered invasive. But the viburnum has a very similar beautiful fall color, so it would be a great substitute for a burning bush. Another viburnum, and I actually have one of these in my yard. I bought it. This will be the 3rd summer for it, and it had berries last year. Brandywine viburnum, pink and blue berries on it, and it is self-pollinating. You don't need another viburnum nearby. A lot of times, shrubs that have berries on them, you will need 2. You need two that will bloom around the same time. That's true with apple trees, other fruit trees, you need two, unless the plant is self-pollinating. Now this one says it's self-pollinating, but in most cases when something is self-pollinating, it still does better if there are two. I only have one plant right now, and it has to be something different too. It's got to be so another Brandywine won't help. And it needs to be something that's, I don't know what, 10 feet away, 5 feet away, depends on the plant, I guess, and depends on the wind and whatever. But the idea being that the pollinators have to be able to get to both plants at the same time. And so yes, this one's self-pollinating. And look at this one, blue muffin, blueberries on there. Not blueberries you could eat. Who knows if they're edible or not. But this is a viburnum called blue muffin with blue berries on it. Spice baby viburnum. It's a smaller viburnum, I think Viburnum carlisi, which is very fragrant. I have a Spirea, not a Spirea, my apologies to aging politicians everywhere who stumble over their words. I completely get it. Anyway, I have a viburnum around the corner outside the garage, and beautiful fragrance. And I brought some branches inside the house. Really nice. Weigela is another plant family that has been around. I mean, plants been around for years. Weigela, it's very possible your grandmother grew one. She might have also grown a viburnum, but probably with just plain green leaves, pink flowers in the spring. The summer wine has a darker purplish foliage, and that looks like a viburnum right behind it with the white flowers. But anyway, again, be careful to not plant too many colored foliage plants nearby each other without having a buffer of green. You want that to be an accent. So that's summer wine, dark purple foliage. This one's called My Monet, and see, it's got the variegated leaves. So when the flowers are done, like I said, it's a shrub, it's going to bloom for a few weeks. When the flowers are done on this, you've got that beautiful variegated foliage. But get a load of this one, My Monet Sunrise. Look at that beautiful orange color. Now, see, I don't know if this is taken in a nursery where those plants are next to each other. I sure would not plant them next to each other because the foliage is too similar. And if you're from if you've heard of this, the saying about mismatched wallpaper, this is what that looks like right there. But the plant itself, and again, flowers in the spring. This is another one. I don't know if I care for this one as well. It's beautiful. Maybe it's because I'm seeing it not up close, but the flowers and the foliage to me just look all kind of mixed together. But again, this is a very small one, and variegated leaves. And when the flowers are done blooming, you just have nice variegated leaves. Ninebark, another completely separate family of shrubs that has so much variety in them. The hybridizers are having fun, giving us what we want, and giving us the color. This one, ginger wine, has that dark foliage and get a load of the colors. And again, most of these have nice fall color on them. Amber Jubilee ninebark, look at that yellow foliage. Tiny wine has the new growth is orangey looking, and then there's pink flowers there. Okay, Ivory Halo, this is not a native dogwood, but I've always admired this one because of the variegated leaves. It's been around for years and years. There's a newer type out. I think this one might be native, Arctic Fire. Now the leaves on this one are not variegated, but you do get the berries in the spring and the beautiful red twigs. And every year, every fall, I say, why didn't I plant a red twig dogwood years and years ago? Because I want them for containers. Those are nice to cut the twigs for containers. It's the new growth that gives you the best color. And maybe this will be the year for me, right? Nikko blue hydrangea. Now, hydrangeas are not native to this area. Matter of fact, they are native to, is it China, Japan, somewhere? Yes, not nearby. But the Nikko blue hydrangea has been around for years. Now, there are 6 different families of hydrangeas. Think about families like last names, first names. I have 2 sisters. One of them's a twin. There are 3 of us. We were the Tasso girls. Lynn, Lana, and Linda, and we're all different, right? Lynn and Lana might have been a little closer in looks and whatever because we're twins, not identical twins. The same way with hydrangeas. There's the hydrangea family. There's hydrangeas siblings, we'll call them. Hydrangea paniculata, Hydrangea macroflora, and whatever. So 6 different families. This one is Hydrangea macroflora, macrophylla. And when from years ago, that was the only Hydrangea macrophylla you could find in garden centers. Maybe another one. It might have been one other, but that one was very, very popular, Nikko blue. But I would have so many customers say to me, I have this beautiful hydrangea, looks just like that, and I never have flowers on it. And that's because hydrangeas, not being hardy or marginally hardy in our area, the twigs that have the flower buds on them die back during winter. And since it blooms on the wood that it grew last year, we call that old wood. It blooms on old wood. Winter pruned that old wood off for you. And so you are left with a shrub with no flowers. Okay. Now, again, hybridizers giving us what we want, have newer varieties that bloom on old wood and new wood. So even if last year's wood dies back a little bit, you still have new growth on this year's wood. These plants are also hardier, which means that maybe you won't lose last year's wood, okay? And you'll have last year's and last year's wood, old wood, and new wood. Now, Endless Summer is just one of several that will bloom that way on old wood and new wood. It's still a Hydrangea macrophylla, but again, a little hardier and hybridized to do better in our area. Now you could still find Nikko blue. Actually, I see them a lot of times in those little cardboard boxes, the dormant type. I would say stay away from those. If you see a hydrangea with the florist gift wrap, the little floral hat, looks like an upside down hat, the little floral paper around it, that is a sign that it's a florist hydrangea or a florist azalea, a florist, even mums, that we get mums in the spring that way. Those are grown in a greenhouse environment as a florist plant, a floral plant. So don't plan on planting those outside. Sometimes they will have a variety name on them. And I've looked and it will say, okay, this one is hardy from zone 6 to 9. So definitely not going to do well in our area. Okay. So just always look at the zone and you can look it up if you need to. This is Hydrangea Firelight. This is a Hydrangea paniculata. Again, those 2 Latin names, the genus and the species, tell you a lot. These are very, very easy to grow in our area. They might all be natives, but I would say some of them are the paniculatas. And this one in particular will get pink in the fall. The color changes a little bit. Oh, let me go back to this one as well before we leave the scene. Hydrangeas, macrophylla hydrangeas only, will turn blue if the soil is acidic. And in most of the area where I live, Northwest Indiana anyway, most of the people I know, my neighborhood and surrounding, the soil is not naturally acidic. And therefore the flowers will not turn blue. They will be more like a pink or maybe purple. The reason that most of our blueberries are grown in the DeMott area, Hebron, out that way, is because it's naturally acidic there. Now you can amend the soil to make it more acidic, but as it rains and through the years, that is going to, all that, whatever you add to it, the soil acidifiers are going to leach back out of the soil, and you'll be back with a neutral soil again. So it's really hard to get them to be blue if your soil is not naturally acidic. But these here, the paniculatas, they are white to begin with. They will turn, some of the varieties like this one, the Firelight, will turn pink as the summer wears on. Some of them will have a little pink to them to the beginning. They're never going to be blue. They are not macrophylla hydrangeas, but they will get pink like that sometimes. Some of them will stay whiter. I should have taken a picture. There's a PG hydrangea tree. PG stands for Paniculata grandiflora. So it's a hydrangea, Paniculata grandiflora, or PG. And it's a tree form. Beautiful white flowers, also very easy to grow, and does very well in our area. Now that one, little Bobo hydrangea. It's small and it's white. And again, hybridizers are giving us what we want. People want them smaller, so we're getting smaller. Did you know that a dwarf plant, or like burning bush, which has been around for years, and I mentioned is now on the naughty list. Burning bush, they came out with a dwarf burning bush, and the dwarfs were still dwarf burning bush is still like 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall, because the originals can get a lot bigger than that. Okay, this is a Hydrangea serrata, tiny tough stuff. It has that little layered look, and some of the some hydrangeas like these will grow flowers all the way along the stem. Not all of them necessarily. Always read the information on the tags and do your research. But if it blooms on old wood and new wood, but if the old wood were to die over winter, I think it's this particular one of the serrata hydrangeas will still bloom, because even if it dies back, the tips die back, it'll still have blooms lower on the stem. Okay. I hope I didn't, I hope that's not clear as mud. Another family of plants. Now those were all shrubs. These are perennials here. Heucheras, Heucherellas, and Heucheras. And this is not one plant, of course. This is a collage I just found online, a beautiful picture. Lots of different foliage colors, but these are perennials. They hold their color and they hold their leaves all through the winter. They might not look as perky in the wintertime, but I don't either. This is Creme Brulee Heuchera. Now, the one thing I want to mention, Heucheras, again, for years, they were called coral bells. They had green foliage, just plain green foliage, and little tiny flowers at the tips that look like little bells. They were not noted necessarily for their flowers, and flowers never last on perennials and shrubs. But they were called coral bells because the flowers were coral, red, whatever. But in years since, the hybridizers have come up with and played with foliage color. So we've got Creme Brulee right here, Midnight Rose. I think that's the one I have actually. Midnight Rose, look at the pink and dark colored streaking in there. Again, you wouldn't want a lot of that, and you wouldn't want it necessarily with a backdrop of dark mulch, because it just wouldn't, it would look foreboding, I guess you'd say, but it makes a nice little accent. These are nice container plants as well, but if you put a perennial in a container in our area, it will not make it through the winter. There's just not enough insulation around the pot, and pots are above ground, and it's a good zone colder above ground than it is underground. Here, Dolce cherry truffles and plum pudding. And look at that. Do you see that off to the left-hand side? There's the forest, Japanese forest grass, Echinocloa. Peach parfait, Heuchera. Can you see the little tiny flowers though? They don't really show up. Like I said, these are not grown for flowers. They are grown for foliage, which makes them a nice accent in containers for that reason. Those little yellow things that you could see, those are the beginnings of the flowers. Okay, now we're going to talk about some things to avoid. Does this look anything to my kids? This is on the road to Lincoln, Illinois, where my kids went to school for many years. My kids always thought that looked like a bunny rabbit. Can you see it? And that is some kind of an evergreen that was trimmed to go around those power lines. So when you're planting and designing your landscape, think in terms of avoiding that. By the way, this book here also had some good tips in it too about thinking if you were moving to a new home or starting your landscape from all over from scratch, think in terms of the big items first, like the trees. Where are you going to place your trees? If you put trees at the west side and the south side of your property at a little bit of a distance from the house, that will help with your air conditioning, especially if it's a deciduous tree, because it'll have leaves in the summer. But during the winter, when the leaves drop, it'll help the sun heat up your house. So think of the trees first, and then maybe next the smaller trees, the understory trees. things like redbud and dogwood, smaller trees that in nature grow under bigger trees. And then just keep going smaller and smaller and down to the ground to the last thing you would think of is the ground covers to fill in. And if you fill in your landscaping and don't leave a lot of bare ground, you are less likely to have weeds because nature seems to fill a vacuum very quickly. Bare spots wind up with weeds. And might be a good time to mention Preen, one of my favorite products. Preen is a pre-emergent. It prevents weeds. You would put it on in the spring as early as maybe March, and or depending on where you live and depending on what the weather's like that year, because that always changes. And if you can kill what weeds you have at the end of this year or during this year, just get on top of your weed problem and then use Preen early in the spring. You should not have ongoing weed issues. Another placement error, I would say, I think there's a window in there. What do you think? Maybe picture window? This was taken at a house in central Illinois somewhere. Looks like arborvitas. And I might mention at this time, emerald green arborvita, which I don't think that is an emerald green. That's way too big for emerald green. But we sell thousands of emerald green arborvitas. It's just a nice, maybe 12 feet tall at the max, evergreen, pyramidal evergreen. And sometimes I'll see people buying like 6 of them, only as I'm scanning them or looking at their cart, I will say, did you notice that this one's different? And the other one might be a different variety that is going to get a lot bigger. Now, maybe these people, this has been around for years, so maybe back then the emerald green wasn't a thing, or maybe they thought they were buying, they just grabbed arborvitas at the garden center, planted them, not realizing they were a different variety. In any case, the windows are hiding. Landscaping fabric, I'm not a fan of it. You could choose to use it if you like, but just note that it does not kill anything. So if you are putting landscaping fabric down, make sure everything below is dead first. And you're going to cover it with a layer of mulch. Make sure you use Preen or something on top of that, because again, every year, new weed seeds, the birds are nice about planting weed seeds, and so is the wind. You'll have weed seeds on top of that mulch. Same thing with rock landscaping. Rock looks good for a while, but eventually soil gets blown in between the rocks. The rocks start to settle into the ground. Even if you've got a landscaping fabric or something underneath there, even still, eventually it settles. And soil, airborne soil lands in there and weeds will grow in there. Now, if there's landscaping fabric underneath there, actually, I was gonna say, if there's landscaping fabric under the rock, the weeds won't develop deep roots. And a customer the other day said, nope, he says, I've had them grow and they'll grow through anything. Just not a real fan of landscaping fabric. And I can show you lots of pictures if you want to see them similar to this. Okay, here's what happens when you plant 2 things that have similar foliage near each other. This was taken at my house several years ago. The clothesline is not there any longer. But this area here, this big old area here, is a mock orange, Philadelphus mock orange. And it's been there for years. I've lived in my house 32 years, and it was there when we moved in, already pretty well established. One way not to prune your shrubs is to let it sit for 15 years, do nothing to it, and then break it apart with your bare hands, which is what I did. But anyway, so that's the mock orange right in here. And then this is a Miss Kim lilac. When Miss Kim lilacs first came out, you know, they're dwarf, right? I thought that would be really cool. Again, dwarf is a relative term, and that is still a very big shrub. But the foliage on those two are very, very similar. And so right now in this picture, the lilac is in bloom, but the mock orange is not. So it almost looks like one just big mass of nothing. And it looks like it only has flowers on one side of it. So that's another plug for having some kind of contrast. And here, this is not the kind of contrast I would recommend. This does not look natural. Now, if you like the idea of having a checkerboard hedge of shrubs, then I'm not the one to say, that you shouldn't do that, because you're what you think looks nice and what I think looks nice. It's a personal opinion. You just need to know that this is going to happen. They will grow at different rates. They will grow in different shapes, and it won't have necessarily the same look that maybe you're after. Now those are barberries in the middle. Barberries also on the do not plant list, the invasive species list. We'll talk about more. I've got a slide about that in a little while. Again, some nice arbs, a beautiful hedge of arborvitaes, and this seems to happen more often than not. There will always be one or more than one that starts to turn brown, very possibly not planted well. Maybe the roots were girdled, wrapped up in the pot, and when they were planted, they were not teased apart, and they were just kept wrapping itself into a hole. I don't know what the soil is like there. If it's clay soil, it's very possible that that those plants are drowning. But in any case, we sell thousands of arborvitaes every year, and we have a lot of them returned. We do have a year-long guarantee at Home Depot. We take back a lot of arborvitaes. Now, maybe it's just percentage-wise, because we sell so many, we get more of them back. I don't know. Seems like every plant family has something that it's prone to, just like I think for dog breeds do the same way. Westies will have allergies or something. And so arborvitaes, something that they will maybe be prone to is spider mites. So if you see brown, and I'm mentioning this because a lot of you do have arbs, if you see brown foliage starting, you definitely want to cut that out, because it's not going to, if it's dead, it's dead. It's not going to come back. But also check shake the branch onto a piece of white paper. And if you see flecks of pepper on there, what looks like pepper, that could be just dust. But if they're moving around, that's a sign that it could be spider mites. And then you want to treat for that. And you definitely want to do it soon before it spreads to other trees, especially if you've got a row of them like that. This to me is just I don't know, nothing. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It just could be better. And if I was doing this face to face, I'd be asking you, what do you think? What would you do differently? What I'm seeing here are boxwoods, and I think that's an Alberta spruce right there in the middle. A fine needled evergreen. And also, I'm thinking those are both very similar in foliage texture. What do you think? Now, I'm seeing two different shades of green, which is a plus, but I'm also thinking the foliage texture is too similar. And right here in front of the house, we've got lots more. I love boxwoods. I think they're very nice. When I was a kid, boxwoods did not grow around here. And I remember when they first became a thing, when I was a new master gardener, they were just starting to sell boxwoods in garden centers. So I'm looking at this thinking, is that a dead boxwood in the middle? Or is that another fine-leafed deciduous shrub, which is what it is? And so I'm looking at thinking, again, it just looks, there's not enough contrast there. Now, it might have been nicer to have something with a different type of foliage in the middle, maybe something a little taller there. I don't know. What do you think? I have been told by a landscaper that the hardest landscape to do is your own. And I firmly believe that. Now, this is not my house, but I've had the same problems at my own house, thinking like, what do I do there? And maybe you're like me. You see something, you fall in love with it, and you bring it home and go, oh, now where am I going to put it? I think we all do that at some time or another. I will suggest that if you're doing a landscape border, that you have a gentle curve like this as opposed to a sharp curve like this, for one main reason. And that's, first of all, no, two reasons, I guess. First of all, is that nice gentle curve just is more restful to the eye, but also this here with that sharp curve is harder to mow around. You're going to be taking your mower back and forth like that to get around the curve. It's just something to think about, okay? It would be very easy to have stretched this curve out just a little bit here and made it not so sharp of a curve. Also, think about mowing and when you make the mulch areas around your landscaping. Now this area here, it's a subdivision not too far from where I live. And it's the first few years that they've planted it. Right in here, they've got a nice wide bed for those shrubs here. But over here, we've got shrubs that are like a tree here and a tree here. And can you imagine mowing, especially in a commercial, not a commercial, but a subdivision like this, which is probably commercially maintained. Can you imagine mowing in and out of all those little circles? A friend of mine several years ago had a huge tree that fell down during a storm, and she was going to have it replaced, and the landscaping company wanted to bring the beds out, this far from her house. And she was thinking, they just want to sell me plants. They just want to sell me mulch. And it kind of bothered her. But years later, I'm looking at it differently too. I'm thinking, again, the scale, the house was not a huge house, but to have a bigger landscape in front of it just looks nicer and would be easier to have the plants clustered together that way. Okay, here are the problem plants. Up in the top left, we've got Euonymus elatus. Down here, we've got Euonymus fortunii. Can you believe these are related? You probably have seen these plants and they look very, very different, but they're both in the Euonymus family. Burning bush, Euonymus elatus. And down here, Euonymus fortunii. This is probably emerald gaiety and emerald and gold. These two are like low-growing evergreen shrubs. And this is burning bush deciduous shrub. So they're in the same family, both considered invasive. And therefore, a couple of years ago, someone from the DNR Department of Natural Resources, came to garden centers and said, you cannot be growing these or selling these. I'm sorry, you cannot sell these anymore. Now, like I said, I've seen burning bush in garden centers recently. I know at Home Depot, we were getting some because our growers were located in Illinois or in Michigan. And so they weren't aware, and it was a new rule, and they were not aware of the fact that we could not sell those things. So we would see them in garden centers anyway. My clock's ringing here. So I don't know if they, somebody in a garden center told me that they changed their mind. I don't know who they are, changed their minds. And I have not been able to get a definitive answer at this point. Now, unfortunately, this beautiful flowering pear here, like I mentioned before, they have a nice kind of an oval shape and just a nice look to them. And so they were perfect for parkways and smaller places. They would grow maybe 35 feet tall, not huge. Beautiful flowers in the spring. And unlike crab apples, which crab apples are in the same family as roses, and they are prone to all kinds of diseases and yellow leaves and black spot, just like rose bushes are. But pear trees, no problems. And but unfortunately, they have become very invasive. And if you're going down the street, they were in bloom not too long ago where I live. And just driving down the street, you'll see them popping up here and there and growing in neighborhoods. A friend of mine had one surprise her at her house, and but they're still allowed to be sold in the state of Indiana, just because it would be a hardship to the nursery industry. Growers that have been growing trees for sale in 5 gallon, 7 gallon size or whatever started growing those trees before these rules came out. And so to say right now, sorry, you can't sell those, they would be losing a lot of money on that. So they're considering it detrimental to the garden industry at this point. English ivy grows like crazy. I would not buy it. I've discouraged a few people from buying it, even though I'm seeing it in the garden center again. And like I said, I don't know if it's because they've backed off on the laws, or if it's just that those things are slipping in. Barberry, beautiful plants. And again, one that hybridizers are growing to, or hybridizing to be beautiful colors and different shapes. There's one that's a pillar shape, and but again, not able to be sold. The Japanese honeysuckle is illegal, but there are native honeysuckles that are fine. And like I said, with the burning bush, Viburnums might be a good substitute for those. Okay, there's why you don't want to use English ivy. And be thankful we don't live in the South where kudzu is a thing. Kudzu. Look it up. It grows like 12 inches a day or something. It's insane. If you are planting trees or shrubs, do not dig the hole any deeper than what it is already, because if you do, you disturb that soil, the plant will settle, and you don't want it to settle. You want it to grow at the same level that it already is in the pot. You can dig the hole wider and amend the soil. Always follow the directions on the label as far as how much soil to mix in. Because if you have, especially if you have clay soil like this here, in clay soil, you want it so that the plant is actually sticking up out of the soil a little bit higher, taller. Again, don't disturb the roots because you don't want it to, or the ground below the pot or below the root ball. You take it out of the pot, of course, because you don't want it to settle. But what also you don't want is to have all this nice area around here to be full of beautiful, rich soil, because then that tree becomes like a spoiled child and does not need to reach out and develop roots. It is just like a little child that does not develop roots because it doesn't have to. And also the term, the bathtub effect, refers to what happens when it rains, and all that nice rich soil that has maybe sphagnum moss in there, peat moss in there, all sucks up all that water, and you will actually drown the plants. Now that could be what happened to those arborvitaes in that picture. I don't know what kind of soil they had there. Okay, as a general rule, you prune shrubs right after they're done blooming. Right after. Don't wait too long. Don't wait till fall, because a lot of flowering shrubs bloom on, they bloom on the wood from that they've developed the previous year. So like I have a lilac at my house. It's getting ready to bloom pretty soon. I have a viburnum that's blooming right now. If I want to prune those two, I should do it right after they're done blooming, because throughout the rest of the season, that plant, that shrub, is developing cells that will become flowers next year. And if I prune those in the fall, I've just eliminated those cells and then therefore have no flowers. Now, again, this is a hydrangea. This is a Annabelle hydrangea. It looks like Annabelle. My mind went blank. Arborescens, hydrangea arborescens. And that one, again, I think you'd have to prune that depending on what kind of hydrangea. Every hydrangea is a little different. If you go to the Proven Winners website, they have a wonderful chart, like a flow chart. Why is my hydrangea not blooming? And you choose the answers. What kind of shrub is it? What kind of hydrangea is it? When did you prune it? That kind of thing. They also have a nice video on the Proven Winners website, hydrangeas demystified, because they get confusing. Did you know there are clematis that are considered, I think they call them type 1, type 2, type 3, prune at different times depending on what type of clematis you have. Okay, so there's two different kinds of pruning. Heading back pruning is when you just whack the whole thing, no more than a third at a time, no more than a third each year, let's say. And when you do that, that's to control overall height and shape of a shrub, only a third. Or you could do renewal pruning, where you remove 1/3 of the branches every few years. So like year one, if you could divide the branches like into thirds, let's say, and divide, you take out these certain branches, the biggest branches, let's say you take out 1 year, the next year you take out another third, and just do that every year. That's what should be done. If I ever plant those red twig dogwoods like the Arctic fire, because every year I could cut the twigs that I need for my containers. And that's how you would do it. You would remove the oldest ones, but the newest ones are the ones that have the nice color on it. But if you're doing this renewal pruning on a continuous basis, you won't have the really, really old ones anyway. This photo was taken at the Anderson Japanese Gardens in Rockford a few years ago, and I just absolutely love it. When I look at it up close, though, I had a picture of it. I don't think I have it in here. I actually did put that in black and white. And to be honest, it is everything, a lot of fine texture there. But I like the fact that there are the rhododendrons and azaleas in bloom. I do see some chartreuse foliage. I see some tall things, big things. I think I see a red bud blooming back there in the corner. I see some, looks like hostas and junipers that are hanging over it's just beautiful. I just love that picture. I think more than anything, what I like about it is the chartreuse contrasted with the lilac purple color. Absolutely beautiful. And I think that is the end of my, by the way, this is my Korean viburnum, Korean spice viburnum. I think it's called Birkwood. No, Judd viburnum, I don't remember now, but beautiful fragrance, beautiful fragrance. And so that's all. I have some Proven Winners books maybe left over if you if you live near where I do and want one of those. I think I could get you one. If you have any questions, please let me know.